Hi and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be here today and be part of one of the first conversations in conjunction with HSMAI and HEDNA. I was a member of the HEDNA board for many years and currently I'm sitting on the distribution advisory board with HSMAI. Been a great opportunity of learning for me because I'm all things connectivity, distribution, implementation, but really a chance to have a better microscope into the sales organization. I have with me today Anisa Musgrove. Would you like to introduce yourself,
Sure.
Anisa?
So I'm Anisa Musgrove-Vasquez. I've been in the industry now for 16 years doing hotel sales. I've done basically everything under the sun when it comes to hotel sales, and now I've landed in the OTA world, which is a very different space than everything else that I've done. I've had the opportunity to work with amazing teams internally as well as externally. Most recently, I was responsible for working with new connectivity partners in North America and just identifying opportunities. So I had a chance to meet a lot of the people in this room and talk about different ways that we could connect. And now in my new role, I've moved over into managing our strategic partners. So a little bit different, but kind of same.
Yeah, definitely. Well, certainly, if I think about, structures organizationally, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Omni has been my home for quite a while, but certainly when I think about the way our company is structured, we've seen a lot of change over the last number of years. I would say we kind of started before COVID. From a more commercial strategy standpoint and really trying to bring all the different business owners and disciplines within our brand together when making decisions. Some of the things that, we've just recently announced a new chief commercial officer within that part of Omni lives our marketing team, our sales team, our revenue management team, and distribution. And nicely, distribution has really, over the years, gained some traction as its own important part. We don't just live up under sales like we did when I first got there, and certainly also getting some standing when it comes to, yes, revenue management's important, but maybe sometimes we need to be a little bit more nimble and flexible with things. So some of you saw earlier, Mickey Galati joined Omni. It'll be a year in February, but she actually is our corporate director of distribution partnerships. So we really have an active seat at the table when it comes to evaluating potential new business, to expanding partnerships, not only when we look at demand gen partners like OTAs, B2B, but also as we look at our TMC and consortia channels. So that's one of the things I've seen really come about in, say, the last 5 years. A little bump in the road with COVID, but we're back at it again and really have a much bigger seat at the table than we used to.
On the Accor side, so our structure has changed over the years, but for the most part, even though we do have our commercial strategy team, I guess we could call it, which sits in a different organization than the technical teams, because we've always worked very closely with the technical folks, we still do have a very collaborative partnership. So regardless of where anyone sits in the organization, we still make sure we have everyone's voices when we're making the decisions as far as new connectivity partners, just to ensure that all business units kind of we check boxes off for all the business units. And then even on the journey of connectivity, this is where it gets interesting whenever I'm having, or when I used to have conversations with new connectivity partners. They're like, okay, so after we connect, sign the contract, we don't have to talk to you anymore. I'm like, nope, we're still gonna talk, because we still have to have kind of an annual idea or plan of how is this going to work for both parties, right? So sales on the Accor side is always a part of the conversation, not just in the beginning stages of the connectivity.
Yeah, and I'd say we've really spent some time last 2 years, 3 years, putting some structure around, how do I identify pieces of business that we want to go after or expansions to our partnerships, taking things into consideration that we didn't necessarily always give value to in the past. And some of that, for me even, is what does it take for my team to build and maintain some of these connections and rate products and content? Is it easier? Is it hard? And do we find the value and the ROI overall when we take this expansive list of things into considerations? We even really look at payment methods, which really was not something in the past we paid much credence to. It's like we just want to connect and sell rooms. So I've seen the growth in that and our continued focus on how do we best evaluate business in a way that we weren't necessarily looking at it in the past.
Yeah. And to Cindy's point in regards to just qualifying new opportunities, and as we're working with partners, there are some times when we do have to break up or kind of really just reevaluate the partnership to say, does this make sense as we continue forward? And I would say the first and most important thing is to make sure that we are working together on the same objective as far as making sure the performance is there, right? So whenever we do run into a scenario where now we do need to make a decision with a partner as far as, does this partnership make sense moving forward? It is multiple discussions that we have to make sure that it is mutual and that we are both on the same track as far as, making all of the, or putting together all the initiatives we need to in order to be able to really determine the business performance.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that, there's a couple things that are very important to us internally within Omni. One of them is parity. I know in some other instances it's not as big a deal, but we do take it very seriously. It is certainly something with every partner we evaluate. And like you were talking about, sometimes things just don't work the way we all hope they will. So we're not afraid to take a strong stance on some of the things. The other things is, we like to try new things, but like I mentioned, our vetting process has become a little bit more stringent when it comes to that. Doesn't mean we won't try to throw something out there and see if it works, but in many of those cases now we've got part of the initial testing with some very firm guidelines on what we believe is success versus just, we're going to try it and see what we get, and not having some of those conversations up front about what does it take to consider a new endeavor valuable. So a lot of work in that way happening for us.
Yeah. And then one of the other points, just going back to qualifying connections, I think there's this mindset that it's an easy, quick, we could just connect and move forward, right? So that's one of the things that we've definitely seen where, there may be certain things that, I say standard in air quotes because we're not really standard, right? So there's some things that we may say, okay, is standard, but as the connectivity project continues forward, you kind of identify different things that you need to go back to and tweak a little bit to make sure it works for everyone. So as much as we would love for it to be a flip of this switch, even when you're certified with partners, there's still some work that needs to happen. And one of the experiences that we've had is newer players into the OTA space. There's definitely more time that we spend in supporting them to make sure that they understand hotel distribution fully, which is what we're committed to because we want to make sure the partnership works in the end.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit like if you're going to give advice into new entrants into the area and they're looking to work with suppliers, what do you recommend? I mean, I think we find quite often that they've got one certification, they think they're ready to go, and then you find out that Accor is different than Omni and some of the ways that we support connectivity. Internally, we take a really strong stance on implementation and certification. I have people on my team, and it doesn't have to be lengthy, but certainly we have a checklist we want to run through to make sure that what we're providing to these new entrants is successful for them as well as successful for their guests and set the right expectations. So I think that, internally we found it important to do some certification. And then the second thing when it comes to the new entrants, certainly we're trying to help provide value to them to potentially identify gaps that may not have been hit previously. So those are kind of, I find that there's great ideas, but then the whole connectivity mindedness behind it isn't quite there yet as we're starting to go through. So please, as you look at your organizations, do you have truly connectivity experts to help take you to that next level and be good partners as you're entering the scene?
And I can't stress this enough, having folks that's on your team that's experts in hotel distribution is critical because you may be an expert in your space, which everyone wants to jump on board with your new platform because it's such an exciting and new, thing in the space. Having folks that are really experts in hotel distribution is going to be very important because, it's a completely different world.
Yeah, definitely. I think we had one more thing, and I think we were going to talk about fear of missing out.
FOMO,
Do you
yes.
ever have fear of missing out? So, I mean, I'll give you an example. We like to try some new things. We try to vet it as best we can, and sometimes they work really well for us. We did do something, oh gosh, April maybe of last year, where we were trying with a luxury type website. Was very manual, a lot of effort, and we thought it might be the next big thing, and it didn't turn out to be. The 8 bookings that I got for my 12 hotels was enough to say, well, that probably wasn't a great use of our time at this point in time. So there's pros and cons to it. So when I think of missing out, definitely we try to do our legwork first. Sometimes we could take a shot in the dark, but one of the things that we figured out how to do is kind of be okay with saying, yeah, that was not successful, and it's okay not to do that again right now. How about you?
So I wouldn't necessarily say FOMO, but there has been opportunities that I felt we should have connected faster. But then when you have the first kickoff call with those partners, and then you realize, you know what, it's good that we waited. So
Yes, exactly. I think that somebody was telling me a story about there was an opportunity in the very beginning in the ground floor of something that's become a big part of our industry in the last 10 years probably. And she had a little bit of FOMO, but I think sometimes I'm okay with not being the first in, because sometimes that means a lot of work and with little gain initially. But yeah. I think that we're the only thing standing between you and lunch. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions or want to ask anything of Anisa and I, we're around. Please say hello, and we're happy to share what we're doing at our organizations and how we might be able to help you. All right.